are you two doing this week to save America?
Go, Lynn.
Yeah, here we go.
Ah,
Let's
We
get
might
into
be doing
this.
the same thing. So we might be doing the same thing. So
this week we are trying to stop the State Board of Education. We'll be there on Wednesday testifying and Thursday to stop global education resources coming into the schools statewide. They're trying to impose
Global
state-
education resources.
Well, it's Open Education Resources is a global education movement, and it shifts the away from textbooks to technology. So we're fighting that at the state board. That came in through a bill, but they're trying to impose it through the state board and then the local school districts.
And when you say global, I mean, I always think of Texas as a strong, independent nation state, right?
Right.
But you're saying that's got this global influence. Is that what you're
yeah,
saying?
but you're right. That's accurate because Texas educates 10% of America's children. And that's why we have chosen the education system in Texas to be the place that we try to create a blockade for the advancement of the globalization and the abolishment of a constitutional republic. Because it's actually what is happening through our school systems, aside from the fact that children aren't being educated and that it's a great the Texas Education Agency is where money is spent so that it's hidden and so that profiteers are accessing it and that the public can't see. So
Wow.
that is why the State Board of Education, even though they have very, very, very limited authority, because the legislative body in Texas repeatedly rebukes them by taking authority away from them with laws when they don't operate the way that the legislature wants them to. But they do have a little bit of power. And so I'm actually going to get there before Lynn, and I'm going to talk to them about fiscal accountability of our charter school system in Texas, because the charter schools are not held accountable by the education agency fiscally or from a standpoint of what's actually being taught and what the are they living up to their charter, what they applied to for charter, and do we need more charters? I mean, we have lots of data on children and lots of data on teachers in Texas, but we do not have accurate nor transparent data on what's happening with all of the privatization of education in Texas.
And you know, on that note, Mary, so a lot of people in the conservative movement and Republicans think that charters are the answer to our failing public schools. And what we're saying is we actually pay for a dual system. So we're paying for both systems. Charters were supposed to be innovative and lift all boats and bring market forces. And you hear a lot about, and when she says privatization, that's shifting public money into private hands. Well, a lot of conservatives are for that because they think the public schools are a monopoly. But when you and I were in school, they didn't refer to the schools as a monopoly. That's a market term. That's a marketplace term. And yes, I mean, technically they do hold they corner the market on education.
Right.
But once they started introducing market terms, and they viewed the kids as little investment vehicles for profit. So it's like a cash cow in our school districts, both at local level and the state level. And so we're not for privatization because that's just going to shift the money into new corrupt hands. So we actually have taxation with representation in our school districts, but charters do not. So they have they have appointed boards, not elected boards. Now, you could argue, well, our school boards are corrupt and they're not accountable. Agreed, true, but two wrongs don't make a right. So why would we pay for two systems that are both failing? They both have the same woke, issues. They both have the same state test, the STAR test, through the accountability system, and they both have the same standards set by the state board.
So, and the other thing that I would say is that we say nationalized because even though what is happening in Texas with House Bill 1605, which is a statewide curriculum, and you have this statewide curriculum, but we hear, because we network with people in other states on a consistent basis, that this is happening just like the push for vouchers is nationwide. so is this push for a statewide curriculum in every state. So these things are not happening in isolation.
Right.
And one of the, I would say, the powers that be that has really, I mean, people from other states are pouring money into Texas to our governor to help him advance and make sure that he delivers Texas to a voucher system. Because if Texas is, you know, it's like, I always look at it like, here's, we've got a train track, and if we can dislodge a piece of the train track, we at least slow it down for America to wake up.
Mm.
So that's what we're doing. We're working on dislodging the train track every day. And really, we do work this every day in some form or fashion, because when the lights go out in Texas, the lights of Lady Liberty go out.
Yeah. I think the hard part is there's these marketing terms that, because look, there's an issue with education. There's
Sure.
a lot of well, kids aren't getting educated and parents are frustrated about what they're being taught. And so parents who have the responsibility need to take more responsibility, and they're hurting and they're searching for answers.
Mhm.
And so there's like these marketing terms that will grab people, say, oh, school choice, as well, of course I should have a choice. I'm responsible. I want to choose where my kids go.
Mhm.
But you're saying that actually, as we always say, as we normally say, the devil's in the details, and
Yes.
parents are getting hook, line, and sinker brought into this without looking at the details. And if you search a few pages in, the devil's right there. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, and
What-
we went to the convention and talked about this, and the state convention for the Republican Party, and I'm a delegate and a precinct chair, and so yes, so what they're trying to do is convince parents that this is going to give them freedom and choice, and they use those terms, but they put that in the language not only of the propositions that they put on the ballot, but also in the language of the school choice bills. And we would argue that we already have those choices. We have the freedom and the right and the ability to choose. Now,
Yes.
money's a separate subject. So
Right.
that's really what they're getting at. They want the freedom to take the money and allow it to follow the child. Well, that sounds great. But with the money following the child, so do the government strings. And we would say, why
Yes.
would you flee the government schools only to accept government regulated school choice? It's not really disclosed. And so it's deceptive semantics they use, and it's appealing because we're tired of paying for our government schools and we want to take that money and just let me do what I want with it, but you can't.
Right. There's this idea also in liberty-minded circles where it's ridiculous to think I'm going to give up a right to the government only for them to sell it back to me.
Yeah. Right.
I'm going to
We already
give up
have
a natural right, a natural inalienable right. Inalienable means
right.
that at its core cannot be taken and cannot be given away.
Mhm.
And is raising your child an inalienable right, or is it something it's not inalienable, therefore you can give it to the government for them to sell it back to you with strings attached.
Right.
And
Isn't
that's
that slavery?
absurd, right?
Isn't that slavery?
Yeah, or voluntary servitude, right?
Yeah. Well, you know, so one of the things that I think people struggle with about what Lynn and I do that is different from other people, and they've said, you know, and it's not just Lynn and I, there are many people, but Lynn and I tend to be the face of what is happening on a consistent basis throughout the state. And is that they say we're protecting the children. No, we're educating the parents that is their responsibility, and that it's the parents' responsibility to teach them about religion and to teach them values, and it's their responsibility to choose where they go to school, and that they have rights within that government school. I mean, we are trying to educate the parents as well, because it's the parent. We've created a government system that tells parents, you know, hey, you can both go to work and drop your kid off here, and in the beginning it was, we'll send you a message, we'll call you at work if there's a problem, and now it's like, sign over permission to us, and we'll take care of all the problems while you're at work. And your kid's just going to sleep at your house. And by the way, if your values differ from what the teacher's values or the government's values are, we trump, not you. No pun intended there, Trump. We win that argument, and your values are irrelevant. And our decision, and we have the government behind us, so we're going to win this argument. So don't even enter into the argument. And so we're really trying to empower.
True empowerment.
Yeah, true empowerment. And I'm sorry, I shouldn't have used that word, but
no, it's okay, because really and that's part of what we do at Families Engaged, is that we train parents how to file a grievance or go through the grievance process in the school district. So if they're having issues there, a lot of people have they don't know what their rights are. If you don't know what your rights, you don't know how to fight. Special ed parents tend to know more than the average parent, because they're fighting this, they're dealing with it on a daily basis with their children and the struggles of navigating the public school system. But Mary and I have other solutions that we try to give parents tools on. And, anyone can homeschool. Working parents, it doesn't matter. Single parents, anyone can homeschool, but they need to understand what the resources are. And we point people to those resources, as well as we want to fix what's going on in the public schools, because the majority of our kids, even if vouchers pass, even if people can take that money and let it follow the child, which, by the way, their homeschool and their private school will no longer be private because they've accepted,
because of that line, strings attached.
Strings attached. Yeah.
Because let me run through this scenario. So I'm a parent and I'm upset with what's going on at the public school. And you suggest first, go to the school board, because you elected them to represent you, to tell that, in Texas's case, by the way, I always remind our dear friend, ISD. Everybody just says ISD. I said, don't say ISD anymore. Always remember and make people remember it's independent school district.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Well, you're saying to go to your school board because you elected them to try to fix the issue. And we've seen over the past couple of years that a lot of people have been doing that, rising up and going to these school board meetings and talking to them, and now being targeted by the FBI and whatever. But anyways, but if you can't get resolution there, I'm still responsible for my parents or for my children's education. I want to take them somewhere else. And you're saying that if there is a money following that child to go somewhere else, because we in society gave all that money to government, to then they put the strings attached to determine where you allowed to give it to what curriculum and where. That's
so
the issue.
I want to bring in a word here, because I think it deserves being talked about, and I'm going to use an example that's going to bring us back to our position that there can be no strings attached. We don't care if you let people have their money, if they keep their money. The only way that they have their money is that it does not go through the government. For one, you're going to give the money to the government, and the government's going to keep a pretty big chunk of it.
Right.
So
10% for the big guy, right?
That's right. And then a whole lot of other. So, but the term that's being used across the nation, and specifically in Texas, is universal school choice.
Right.
And recently in Texas, Houston, Texas, or Harris County, which is Houston, they proposed a universal basic income for impoverished families. And they were just going to give them the money. And it entered our attorney general, who filed and said that it was illegal. And the reason it was illegal was because there were no strings attached. There was no definition. And in that pleading, where he sued and stopped them from enacting universal basic income. And I often wonder, well, was that because, Harris County was going to make money off, it was going through Harris County and they were going to set up their own system instead of the state? Is that why they stepped in? But at any rate, regardless of why they stepped in, universal basic income was ruled illegal if it did not have the strings attached. And then they're using the terminology universal school choice. I think that's a real clue to the public. And so when Lynn and I went, because we've not hit the nail on the head, which is Lynn and I are suddenly we're always under a little attack, but now we're under a lot of attack by people in our own party. And anytime we have pushed back with truth, which started with our position with a state board of education member, and we were exposing truth about money and donors, and so there was a big hit back then, and we were liberals and we were Democrats, and we kibitzed with the wrong side of the aisle and whatever else. That was the beginning, was that we're Democrats and we're liberals. And then of course we showed up at the state convention because we've both been involved in our party the Republican Party for a really long time. And I said to Lynn, you got to come to the convention. You got to see how the sausage is made.
Right.
I got to get you there. You got to know how the sausage is made, so you understand what I'm talking about. And so we went, and they had every scenario put in place to make sure that our agenda was not only not heard, but was blocked by paid operatives that were in positions in the party. And one of the litmus tests for being a delegate this time was whether or not you were pro-school choice or anti-school choice. And we're not anti-choice. We're just opposed to the government expansion of education via a voucher.
Yeah.
So we got there, and we literally undid their agenda because they did not want it to say no strings attached.
Right.
Because when it says that the party is insisting that no strings attached, it's a poison pill.
The governor won't sign a bill without strings. He said that explicitly. And now that we know the ruling on universal basic income, and we know the details, the devil in the details of the school choice bills, they have all kinds of strings, which I could go into, which I did when I was at the convention. I defined them. And it's because everyone says they don't want strings. Oh, right. I don't want the strings, except for the pale horse operatives and those who are paid to be there that infiltrated each committee with the convention. They're paid by West Texas oil man or I don't know if it's both those major oil men, but they stacked those committees so that they could get their agenda through. Well, they weren't expecting the grassroots and all of these parents coming in there saying, no, we don't know. Take your strings out of there. So we want the language to stay in there, no strings attached.
Yeah.
Now, battling the strings is and the definition is another battle, but at least people understand what that means.
I mean, that is quite a conundrum. I never really thought about that universal basic income, that language, prepping the battlefield, as they say.
Yes.
Because
and healthcare, universal healthcare.
Yeah, absolutely.
Basic income. We don't
this whole idea that this universal basic income, I think, is obnoxious. It's going to do what's it going to do to prices and all of that. But instinctively, as a conservative, I'm like, wait a minute, there should be strings attached. I just don't want them spending it on this and that, whatever. I can understand that. It's that people say that about, welfare, SNAP, or whatever they call it. It's, well, they're just spending it on this and this and this. Well, let's put conditions on it so they can only spend it on whatever. And that kind of makes sense. But then when it comes to the education side, I don't want strings attached. I don't want you telling me. So you're essentially, and I think I heard you say this, but not quite in these terms, but our property taxes are ridiculous. And where I am, they're so high. It's a second or third highest in the nation. And 80% of it goes to the local school district. And my daughter will never set foot in a public school. And so, I want to get this money back so I can go take it where I want it to go, but it's going to have strings attached. Can we get it to the point where they don't take that much in property taxes to begin with?
So, that's an interesting proposition, because in Texas, there's a large groundswell of grassroots that are fighting the property tax. And they have been promised by several of the politicians that they would get them that they would abolish property tax. Well,
including Abbott. I remember when I saw that announcement, and it was election season, and I took this screenshot. I said, oh, this is huge. I sent it around. I'm going to pay attention to this, and crickets, really. Maybe. I don't know. I'm outside Texas. So
Well,
They're
where is
mutually
that?
exclusive. You can't do both
you
because
can't do
property
both.
taxes fund the schools and what will potentially be the vouchers. So think about that.
Yeah.
So they can't have it both ways. You can't have vouchers funded through the comptroller and the legislature and everything running through the government while you're abolishing property taxes.
Yeah. What is the best case scenario for this now? I'm a parent. I'm upset. I don't like what's going on there. I'm going to my elected representatives and they're not doing the job. But at the beginning and the end of the day, that's my daughter.
Mhm.
I'm responsible. So I've got to do something now. I can't wait for hopefully we can get enough people to elect the right. No, I'm responsible for it. What's my
The churches.
action?
I mean, the churches, what we need is more churches to say, we've got a crisis here. Our parents can't afford because of the high cost of living. They can't afford to do these expensive private schools, which are $20,000, $30,000 in Dallas or wherever. I mean, the most inexpensive one is maybe 10. So parents who can't afford that, our churches need to rise up. We need to get creative, create co-ops. We need to have options that are outside the box. And people need to put their heads together. So then if you have working parents, then you're outsourcing certain pieces of the academic, what they're doing throughout the day. But really, when you look at homeschooling, they're not learning 8 hours a day. You only need a few hours. And at the public school, they waste. You're doing so many other things besides learning. So, it's you do have to get creative with enrichment and other things besides just the academic piece. But people need to set aside what their view of education is. Oftentimes, it's what they received. But most importantly, children need to be receiving a classical education. And we found that the Texas Education Agency and those who are pushing this virtual learning and online education resources, this global curriculum, they will say, oh, it's a classical model. And they've co-opted our language.
Right.
No, we're against it. So now they're saying this UNESCO term, open education resources. Oh, it's a classical model. And they're going to have the Bible, these beautiful stories of Esther, and talk about the kings and Nebuchadnezzar. And so they're deceiving us, and they're inserting things that they think the religious right will accept or conservatives will accept, but it's not what they think it is. But other solutions, as far as like there are programs like Coram Deo where they're half homeschool, half go to school, so it's not as expensive as a private school. Lots of options. Friend Nikki Truesdell wrote a book, Anyone Can Homeschool. I often reference her, and she's on Twitter. There are other resources. If somebody wants to, there's no stopping a parent from doing it. And we have very good homeschool abilities, and we have the right to do that. And a lot of people
And so all of those different options. And so I can choose this curriculum. I could choose the actual classical Christian education if I want for my child. I could choose this education, this curriculum. But the moment I expect the government to give me a check for that, it's going to come with strings attached. And then that same classical Christian education or this curriculum or this homeschool or whatever will then be controlled by the state because of those strings. And you're saying that there is the way they're proposing it is not school choice proper.
Correct.
It is government defined school choice.
Correct. It is this, as we say, it's the camel's nose under the tent, or the slow creep. And if you look at the society that we live in today, where you go to the airport and they literally want to take a picture of you, TSA wants to take a picture of you to even walk through there. It's optional, but most people don't know it's optional, so they get their retina scanned unless you say, hey. So there's a lot of education that needs to go on for people to understand the society that the oligarchs are trying to set up using political operatives, and that they must protect their children from being a part of it. So one of the great reasons that you see a push is because during COVID, a lot of people withdrew their children from school, and the government has no idea where these kids are because they never came back and they're not able to track them. And so they really need to get a handle on where are these kids and how do we track them? We cannot have them. I mean, the illegal immigrants can come into our country and we don't track them. But boy, if you're a citizen and you live in Texas and you're out of the school system and the government cannot keep data on you to formulate basically an ESG. And a lot of people say, we're tinfoil hats talking about ESG. Well, really go to any corporation and Google their website and it says ESG. Right. So I mean, for us to be called, conspiracy theorists when we talk about ESG is just folly.
Just tell them to wait 6 months. It'll be, Exactly. It won't be a theory anymore.
But I want to go back to your question is, the solution is, people should be allowed to keep their money, because if you're not there, so like I don't have any children in the school system and I'm still going to pay into it, kind of like Social Security, I'm still paying into it. So if you have a child and you choose to not enroll your child, then you should be able to have a tax deduction. And again, that helps some of the people, but it does not help and this is why Lynn and I have taken a hard stance that public education can be fixed and must be fixed. One, it's in our Constitution in Texas, Article 7, that the state provide a free and efficient education for all children in Texas. And so we're required to do that by law. So if you are a taxpayer, if you pay property tax, then you can have a tax deduction. The money never goes to the government. And the schools are still funded, but we still are leaving probably 85 to 89% of the children because the parents don't know better. They don't have, maybe they're apathetic, maybe they just don't know. A lot of parents just don't know. And that's one of the reasons that we want to educate parents. But if we don't fix that public school system, then we are still going to have a humanitarian crisis within really a decade. So, we should all have our hair on fire, literally, about what's happening and force. And what we say is to our elected officials, no, you don't get to spend another dollar of our money until you start repealing some of these bills that have caused the demise of the public school system. And I think everybody should say that. And again, I'm not in Illinois. I know a lot about Florida, but most states have a law that says that they have to provide that. And the more grotesque part of what's happening in Texas is Texas was left a trust that is today called the Permanent School Fund of millions of dollars to set up a trust to pay for our school system. And it for years, it's what made Texas above the rest because that money was there. They no longer are spending the interest off of that fund to fund the schools. They're using it to pledge against debt. We have a lot of fiscal malfeasance that goes along with everything that we're seeing. And again, the citizens have to start holding people accountable. And the minute that you step into the arena and start holding people accountable for, fiscal responsibility with your money. I mean, it's one thing if I screw up with my money, but don't you screw up with my money. Right. And so we can say to you, we want you to get your tax dollars, but we cannot turn a blind eye to the illegal immigrants that have just been allowed in our country that we are by federal law required to educate, again, humanitarian crisis. And very quickly, we will be a third world country. And I know that sounds alarmist, but I think if anybody will sit down and really look at the facts, that's what we're headed toward. And do you want your child, even if you can take your child out and educate your child, do you want that to be the peers and the community and the civilization that your child lives in? Because I don't want my grandkids, which are not born, I don't even think they're conceived, but I mean, I don't have them yet. I hope to have them. I hope I get that great promotion to grandparent, but I wouldn't want anybody's grandchild to grow up in that society. We have to put the brakes on, right, and look beyond today.
I want to go back to what you said about a solution regarding not even paying the tax or getting a tax deduction and not even giving the money to them for them to put strings on it to give back for the education. Dive into that a little bit. How would that work? What's that look like?
Well,
And sorry, and the reason I ask is my property taxes, how crazy they are, and how crazy they are in so many places, is still less than the average dollars spent on a public education. So that deduction from your property taxes, from additional taxes, or what? How would that
Especially if you
work?
have 4 kids or 5 kids, or, that gets into, well, you look at Arizona. So they broke the bank in Arizona. They bankrupted Arizona because they couldn't afford the ESA, the Education Savings Account plan that was put forth by the governor and made law. So they can't, the more people took advantage of it than maybe they banked on, or they were banking on. So, but I think one thing that we have, it's not that I would support this. It's that if they're so hell bent on getting a school choice bill passed, why not do a clean bill? Why not do one that has no strings? We saw during the pandemic that money fell from the sky. There were no questions asked, no strings attached. The money just landed in your account, and you can do whatever you want with your COVID stipend or your stimulus money, right?
yeah,
Okay, so
but
we know it's possible. I'm not saying I endorse it, but I'm saying
Right.
it's possible. So there's much more going on here, and there are vendors baked into these bills. So
Yes.
you have a new private vendor that will collect up to 10% in some states for the education savings accounts. And I learned this from our friend Alice Linehan, that this sets up a new banking scheme. ESAs are banking schemes. There are vendors involved, and so with that, that's what we call it, a vendor bill. Several of the bills had that in them in Texas. The two that rose to the top were House Bill 1 and Senate Bill 1. House Bill 1 was $32 billion because they tried to tie in all of these things like teacher pay to get the legislature behind it and get the votes. And then Senate Bill 1 was $500 million. It ran through the comptroller. It grew government. A lot of these bills grow government. They grow the education agency employees. They grow the comptroller's employees. So when conservatives talk about, we don't want to grow government, we want to shrink government, less government, don't tread on me, that's not what they're asking for with these bills. And when they support them, then we have to point out, you're a hypocrite. You are actually for the growth of the government. You're for the growth of the education agency, which we would argue needs to be abolished. Not only do we need to abolish the federal Department of Education, which Trump is now saying again, which he said he was going to do that the first time around, and he didn't. He grew it as well. He grew it through Betsy DeVos. But hey, we'll give him a second chance. He better do it this time.
Mm-hmm.
Eliminate the federal Department of Education, and even if they don't end it, Texas is Texas. Reject it. Say we don't want your money. You take it. We've got this $33 billion surplus supposedly, which is just over taxation. But Texas has the money. We could stand alone. We don't need the federal government. We don't need your money and your title funds and all your strings and parameters that you make us jump through. So we could do that. But the conservatives, you don't hear them saying that. Now sometimes they're listening to Mary and me, and so now you're hearing some of the legislators that we've gone after say that, because it's what needs to happen. They need to abolish the TEA instead of going after the 1,200 school districts and attacking the teachers and the districts, which that should be individual local decisions to go after them, audit them, expose them. But going after the TEA would have a trickle down effect that would impact. We could cut that funding stream. A lot of what happens at the TEA gets pushed down into the districts. So the corruption starts at the top. That's why we say go for the mothership.
So, and one of the things that you talked about earlier was, showing up at your local school board. And I recognize that I live in a sweet spot in North Texas. And I've been criticized for that. But I have to say, look, I did not live in that sweet spot. I lived in the inner city of Dallas, and I had a child, and I moved. And I moved for one reason alone. I moved for the school. I got out of where I was and I moved to the school. And it meant that I had to drive to work. And then I had to make other adjustments in my life. But where I live is a sweet spot. And the districts where I live have been listening and they know, and they relate to much of what we say. They understand it. They provide the best they can within the constraints of what TEA does, and TEA is punitive when they don't do what they do.
Mm.
What they tell them to do,
Right.
but they are rejecting the federal funds. I mean, they are on their pathway, and one local school district is down to they're only getting 2% of federal funds, and the average in the state of Texas is 20% of federal funds. So there are school districts that realize that the federal overreach and what comes with, CDC, because there's grants through CDC and the Department of Education. I mean, there are all these grants that come to our school districts that literally tie, sex education, LGBTQ. I'm not
Right.
going to say indoctrination, but all of these social things, as well as the data collection, are tied to these federal grants. I mean, diversity, equity, inclusion is tied to a lot of the federal grants. So in general, the federal grants, which we have a saying, we say grants are bribes. So they're bribes to get you to do what they want you to do. And there's a lot of bribing going on in the education system. But again, if you work with your independent school district, and you help them understand that the community is going to come around them, and the community is going to support them reestablishing and reaffirming their independence, we see those school districts doing it. Now, then, there's over 1,200 schools in the independent school districts in the state of Texas. We just barely scratched the surface of that. But, it's kind of like a ripple in the water. You put a pebble in and it's a little bitty ripple. And then you put a bigger pebble in and it's a bigger ripple. And so I'm just hoping for a tide, like, can we just have a big tide here
Yeah.
of the independent school districts standing up? Because that's really what it's going to take. But the answer is either abolish Article 7 in Texas and then let free enterprise really take over, because then it would be free enterprise. It would not be a captured market. But that's very scary for me to think about. And plus that, I don't see the willpower or the desire with our state to remove access to any kinds of funds. The people who serve us in the state of Texas are all addicts to power and money. There's maybe 2% of the people who are elected to office in the state of Texas are not addicted to power or money, and have a true authentic, because they become very wealthy. They're not paid by the state, but they become very wealthy once they're in office and show their loyalty.
Yeah.
And so I think I just said that it's corrupt, in case you didn't hear that.
It is corrupt. And like on that note, we believe that Mike Morath, our TEA commissioner appointed by the governor, he has a potential golden parachute that will pay him handsomely once he rolls out of this position.
Let me guess. One of the vendors.
The one
he's a technocrat,
created
so
it.
he's actually a software entrepreneur. He's had a couple failed .coms, and then was able to sell his piece of a government. It's called Minute Menu, where he worked for a company that did federal lunch programs. And so I do believe, because he has been so generous in steering no bid contracts, data mining scandals, data harvesting, and so he will be rewarded handsomely. And he's also vested with the state, so he's got the pension, and that remains to be seen where he will go. But we are making a lot of noise about his failures at the agency. And, Texas is actually doing really poorly academically, but spending's up, hires are up. He's bloated the administration of the agency, and academic performance is down, especially in math. And then we also know that he can move the goalposts. Something that I think, and I just thought of this, but I wanted to go back to on the universal, that language. So my friend Meg and I met with the Catholic Diocese education lady who's over that in Dallas. She came here from Tennessee. In Tennessee, we believe that they're moving them around like a game board. So she's being deployed now in Texas after successfully helping with that. The Catholic lobby, and this is no attack on the Catholic faith. A lot of our education warriors and our friends are Catholic, and they see it and they're calling it out as well. But the Catholic Church lobbies at the legislature every session for school choice vouchers. So in meeting with the Catholic diocese lady, so she admits that Tennessee has to take not just the norm reference test, they have to take the state test. So she says that, oh no, we'll put parameters in the bills here in Texas, so we'll make sure that won't happen where they have to take the state test. But even though they have to take, in the language, they have to take a norm reference test like Iowa State, all they have to do is co-opt the Iowa State test. This is a game that they play. So all of these established vendors and those who are considered reputable, these testing companies will all, they're all going to be brought into the fold. That's not a solution. Also, with the Catholics, so she admitted that it does increase the cost of the private schools. So if they take the voucher, they're just going to drive up the cost of the tuition, because then they're not going to have to do as much fundraising and all the things that they do. They actually, she told us that they do not accept federal funds, but they do provide all the title services. So think about that. She's saying they do Title 1, 2, 3, 4, all the title services, but no, we don't take government fund. We don't take the federal funds. Well, what they do is they use the pass through. They use these private, or what are they, nonprofits? I forget how they funnel it, but they do it in a backdoor sort of way. They figured out so they can say, oh no, we're clean. We're not taking federal funds. We haven't accepted federal, so that's something to watch, because I do believe she plays an instrumental role in the city of Dallas. Dallas is kind of the deep state of education. We know that No Child Left Behind, and George Bush pulled Sandy Kress from the Dallas ISD School Board. Our commissioner of education came from that same seat on the Dallas ISD School Board. And so what happens in Dallas tends to get scaled nationwide. They do a lot of pilots here. And what happens in Texas, as Mary said, if Texas goes, so goes the nation.
I mean, Texas has been known for having another person said that, Texas is the 8-ton elephant in the room, no pun intended, elephant, that has controlled curriculum throughout the nation, because from a textbook standpoint, Texas buys the majority of the textbooks. So if they're putting their weight on the scale of what the publishers are putting out there, which this has been one of my arguments for quite a while, is that they have the ability to control for the whole nation. So if quite a while ago, if Texas would have said to the publishing companies, we're not taking any of those textbooks because they're horrible, then the textbook companies would have come back and improve the quality of the textbook. And just a couple of years ago, sex education, which I do not believe should be in our schools. I think that the community and the hospitals should offer that as a community service, and that the parents can pick whether they want their child to be educated on heterosexual or homosexual sex, because that's what we're doing in our schools. And so I fought that, and I went to them after reviewing all of the curriculum, the textbooks that were being proposed, and they were all online, by the way. And I said, look, I'm just asking you to reject all of them, because none of them are good. Like, if you have to block out a chapter because it's not acceptable to you, or you have to tell them to go back, and everywhere that it says trusted adult instead of your parent, or they didn't use parent. They used trusted adult everywhere instead of parent. And I have empathy that not every child has a parent, but every child has a parent figure. And the goal is to have your parent. So why are we changing the goal? Why are we diminishing the goal? And so I just asked him, I said, hey, can you guys just reject all of them? Because if Texas says we're not buying this, then they'll come back because they want your money. they'll
Right.
come back and they will not produce this crap. But instead, we had lobbyists in the room that came forth and said the governor wants this. The governor is telling the State Board of Education to approve this because the governor wants it, because it's a crony deal for somebody. I mean, we had a religious organization say, we're going to get you this deal if you'll make these changes in it. And then, the parents have had to dog the SBOE for a year and a half after that adoption to make sure that all the changes were made so that it was somewhat acceptable, even though it's still not acceptable. So, again, we have a lot of power.
We do.
And Texas should be leading. They could be leading, but they're not in any way, shape, or form. I mean, our governor, there were some governors that took a position and signed a resolution that said that they rejected the WEF, they rejected the UN, rejected the WHO. Where's our governor? Silent, because he doesn't reject those things.
No, in fact, he went to the World Economic Forum twice. He flew there in 2020 and in 2016, right after he was sworn in. So he's a globalist, and we have evidence of that. And one thing that people don't realize is I really push back on people a lot. I say, if you are pushing for school choice, you're part of the problem and the reason why we haven't solved the border crisis, election integrity issues. We have so many issues with homelessness, and I mean, all the issues of the state.
Just to insert again, it's not if you are for school choice, it's if you are for government defined school choice, because those of us out here, we're all for school choice.
Right.
Yeah.
When you translate school choice, it means parental rights. So we're for parental rights and parental options and parental responsibility. It's for us to decide and take responsibility for the education of our children. That's what we're for. But the issue again is the government defined school choice.
Yes.
But the government has set up a system that has, and I'm going to use the word snookered a lot of people into thinking that the government is the solution.
Right.
And that happened back with LBJ. And we just have to we really, I mean, again, not being racist here, but the Black community knows that the government destroyed their families. I mean, they know that. They say, the government came in with this money and said, hey, here's a system. And if you're not married, you make more money in this system.
Right.
And if you have 5 kids with one person and 5 kids with somebody else, y'all are going to have more money. So the government set up that system. And so they now have had the time to look at it and have it in the rearview mirror and see that the government hurt them. And they know that. They broke their families. And now the government is continuing to try to break all the families, because when they break down that family, they have destroyed our society. And that's why the LGBTQ agenda is being proliferated, because it breaks down the family. But I mean, and that's that's we can go there. That's probably a different show. But the government has done that, and people. So we like to say, hey, Ronald Reagan said the worst words that you can hear is, hi, I'm from the government, I'm here to help. You mean, right. And the guy's got his hands twisted behind his back. And so you hear what Lynn and I are
Mary
saying.
adds a few extra words.
Yeah.
Yeah, always. I'm a true Southern girl, and we use lots of words and lots of vowels, by the way. So, and I don't even apologize for it anymore. I used to try, but I can't anymore. So, but one of the things that that we have to do is, we have to educate people about that. But you hear what we're saying. We just criticized a Republican governor who the whole nation thinks is the hero, and we're criticizing him. And so in Texas, people hear what we say and they want us to hush. They want us to continue to allow the lie and the facade to exist. But we are pushing back on that, and unapologetically. And so we're being called, what is it they said? The faux conservatives, or what words you say to fake conservatives, or
they just called us liberals and that we're union lackeys.
Yes, and not once did I hear you guys promote the Federation of Teachers Union or whatever that is. And I bring this up because I want to segue to. You guys are highlighting this stuff, shining a big old spotlight on this stuff, and that's probably why you're catching flack now. And now there's some website out there trying to destroy your reputations.
Yeah.
and calling you all sorts of things, fake, what'd you say, faux conservatives, and Mary, you're Lynn's lackey or something, or
Yeah.
what's
Or
going on here?
flunky.
Mary's my flunky, and
Flunky,
we are
right?
lackeys for the teacher unions.
Right.
And let me just give this disclaimer. So I was asked to speak not only at a Republican rally down in Austin, different times, but also an AFT rally, which is American Federation of Teachers. And the way that they introduced me is, Lynn is a staunch conservative. We don't agree. We're on different sides of
Right.
different the aisle. And I don't know if they admitted it that overtly, but they know.
I think he did.
I thought he did.
did.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
this is a sea of leftists. Okay. And that's not to say all teachers are leftists, but union membership is generally left leaning. And so he asked me to speak, the head of AFT, on data mining, data harvesting, and the contracts running through the TEA and how they want to replace teachers with technology. I said, sure. If you give me the mic, I will speak to anybody. If CNN called me, or I don't care. I speak wherever I'm asked to speak, because that's a microphone, that's an audience.
Right.
I'm always looking for people who don't know, the truth, and I'm happy to fill them in.
Right.
So, and I want to point out something, Mary, before we go into that hit piece, the website, is that the governor appointed, there's a lot of talk about Democrat chairs in our House and Senate. Okay, the governor appointed a Democrat to 4 boards and commissions in the state of Texas. And this guy is a former Goldman Sachs partner. And he's come back to Dallas and created this nonprofit. And he has tremendous power, and his name is Todd Williams. So the governor appoints a Democrat to 4 boards and commissions that steer these commissions. They steer funding to education, but he gets to choose while he's on the committee, and then he writes the bills then to steer that funding. So no one talks about that. They just talk about the Democrat chairs in Texas. But anyway, so this hit piece, they can't get us on the facts. So then they start trying to pull up our social media, and they've got all these screenshots. Well, most of the things I read, I'm like, and I mean,
Right.
I don't know if you want to go into any of that, but it's just funny. Whoever did this hit website, they don't know us very well, because they got Mary's picture wrong. There's a picture of me with Mary. It's not Mary. It's one of our other activists. And so they don't even know
I
who
had
they
to call
are.
her and apologize. I'm so sorry. Her name is Georgia Head. We'll go ahead and put that out here.
They put
And so I
Georgia's
said, hey,
head.
Georgia, I'm so sorry, but they're using your head for my head.
Right.
You're being blasphemed. I'm so sorry.
Wow.
But yeah, I mean, they don't know us.
They can't even get the attack piece accurate,
No, there's actually several errors where they say, and I have a very strong social media presence. I put everything out there. I use my own name. I don't hide behind fake profiles, and everything I say from my platform, and especially on Twitter. And I do use some inflammatory terms. I found that if you don't name names, then there's no change. So you have to call out what they're doing. And if these are public officials, I don't go personal. We don't go personal, because it serves. I've run for office before. People go personal. They talk about your hair, and they go
that's
after.
When you know you've won the argument, because they can't argue the facts. They have to go around it, and they got to go personal.
Well,
and
the ad hominem attacks are, it's real. That's what they do.
And the fact that you had enough of a grassroots pressure to the party at the convention to maintain and keep the no strings attached language. This wasn't something you proposed. That was already there. Is that correct?
Well, so the way it works, and I don't want to talk down to anybody, but every Senate district has their own convention in the party, and there's 30 Senate districts here. And so resolutions go through the Senate district. And then once they get through the Senate district, they go to the state level. And so we put resolutions through the Senate districts in regards to, actually, we wanted to kill the resolution. We wanted to remove it. It existed from the prior year as Plank 101, and we just wanted to remove it. We wanted to abolish Plank 101, and so that was our focus, was to abolish it.
The school choice one that
Yes.
Right. As a whole.
because
Right.
it said parents have the right to choose where their kids are educated. It goes into this whole diatribe, and then it's like, and then
Parent
okay,
empowerment.
well, wait, we already
the money
have
will
that.
follow the children. Yeah.
We already have that, so take that out. If you want the money, just say we want money to follow the child to go to this, to their education.
Right.
Instead, they tee it up with, parents should have the right. That was what we were saying.
Yeah.
We're like, they do have the right. Take that out. So we
Right.
said abolish it altogether, or if nothing else, drop it to the bottom of the list. Well, it did not make the top 8 priorities. So we were very effective in doing this. Plus, I mean, it's, 2 years ago, it was on the ballot. Well, since then, they put it on the ballot as a proposition, just, do you want this kind of thing? Well, 2 years ago, it was like
90%.
Yeah, now it's dropping down to 77%. Well, they're saying it's because Democrats are jumping into the race. No, it's dropping because people are wising up. And Mary and I have toured Texas. We've spoken at True Texas Project and all these grassroots groups across Texas in different counties, because we're trying to sound the alarms about the TEA. People are talking about the districts and the books and the sex ed. They're not talking about the TEA, the mothership, and the money
They're not talking about, and we've got to get this, but don't let us end this segment without us talking about the damage of the screen time and the mental issues that are associated with that, and that we are one to. And don't let us forget to cover that, because
that is one of our number one priorities.
That is really what sent us, the data mining that was available because of the one-to-one and all of the information that we were seeing that are on these devices and how they're not safe, and the pornography. I mean, so like we were like, you can take the dirty books out. You can talk about the dirty books. They're just going to make more. But let me tell you, the screen that your child is on, I mean, a video is popping up of sexual acts that we can't even fathom. And I'm talking second graders. So, don't even talk to me about the books until you address that, because you aren't solving anything.
Mm-hmm.
So
the books took all the books, and the vouchers really sucked all the oxygen out of the room in the legislature. And Mary and I try not to go where the noise is. Sometimes we can't avoid it, but we try to go where people, the polarization isn't. So if the unions and if you got the two ends of the spectrum fighting over this or that, we're going somewhere else, because we know that's theater. So the book battle, HB 900, was where a lot of the grassroots and the right went to fight. Mm-hmm. And then of course the left comes in and is like, no, we want the nasty books. And so you got this going on.
Right.
Well, we weren't in that room. We were in the room where they were passing a massive technology bill, House Bill 1605, to bring in this open education resources. It was mentioned, 65 times in the bill, and it was a technology vendor bill for Amplify, which is owned by Steve Jobs' widow. So we were like sounding the alarms on this while we're like, shut up about the books. Go check the book out, throw it out, deal with that locally. That's not a legislative issue. Stop with the books, because They don't want books in this metaverse. They don't want books in the technocratic future. They don't want libraries. Our schools are getting rid of libraries. Really? Do you think dirty books are the thing? No, it's the technology. They've spent all our bond dollars and the bond debt on technology. They want the devices. The governor appointed a technocrat for a reason. They don't care about the books. So then they passed this bill. 100% of the legislators, the Republican, not Democrats, that was split. 100% of the Republican legislators, with the exception of one, voted for this bill. But Mary and I had gone to the Capitol door to door. Then the day before, we had the votes to kill it. We were enlightening them on what it was. Did you read the bill? They don't read the bills. We read the bills. So we go and we were saying, hey, have you read this part and this part and this part? They said, okay, you've got my no vote. Mm-hmm. The next day, they all flipped their votes.
Wow.
What changed it? Well, we were told that they negotiated that with vouchers. We were also told that they negotiated with another parent group, another mom group, that gave them some amendments to make it not quite so the bill's so bad. So, they get a seat at the table, they get to, feel like they're making a difference. And Mary and I said, no, we don't negotiate with terrorists. We're not negotiating on this bill. We're a hard no. It's a bad bill. It's $2.44 billion. And it's to steer from textbooks to technology. That's the definition of open education resources. Where did that term come from? UNESCO, the United Nations Educational Scientific Organization. UNESCO, who created UNESCO? We all know about Aldous Huxley and Julian Huxley. Julian Huxley, Aldous's brother, Brave New World, he created UNESCO. That was his vision, this world vision. So this global education system that they're trying to create, they must have Texas, they must have the nation, they must have all nations. So that's where we're moving. And UNESCO defined the term open educational resources in 2002 to shift the resources away from textbooks to technology. So then we've got legislators that are mocking us, saying, oh yeah, we're trying to turn them into little commies with OER. Well, they can mock us all they want, but we're right about this. We have the receipts, we read the bills, and the guy who carried the bill, he didn't even know what he was carrying. They're cut and paste bills. He's a vet out in Killeen, Texas. Do you really think that
Well, the problem is
he didn't know what he was doing.
We learned that there were lobbyists that were paid $1 million for getting that bill across the line. And anytime a lobbyist is going to get paid $1 million to get a bill across the line, there's a whole lot of other people who are making a whole lot more money.
Yep.
And I mean, if you don't think that the profits are what are driving this, not one thing that is happening is really about educating the children. And we have got to expose. And, I'm a believer. I pray that there will be somebody that is in elected office that will stand up. And there were people who did, and they were punished. I mean, what Lynn and I are experiencing right now is retaliation. And there is no room for retaliation in politics. When you retaliate against someone, you have ended any negotiation. And the other thing, because we're talking about this hit piece, is not one thing that they did is credible. And you know why? Because they hid who they were. If you can't stand behind what you're saying about another person, then what you're saying is not valid. And one of the things that Lynn and I have held to this day, there is not one person that we have ever exposed publicly that we have not gone to privately to get to show them the facts. So
unless they won't meet with us, there's that.
Right.
And there are people
but I mean, again,
the billionaire Dunn, he won't meet with us. We've tried to meet with his.
Yeah, but I mean,
henchmen,
seriously, we're not outing him. I mean, we're not outing him. We're not calling him out on public media. We may talk about the damage he's done to the party and the power he has, but I mean, CNN did that long before we did, and sadly, everybody said, "Oh, it's CNN, so it's not true." Well, no, it's CNN, and it was true, but I just, and when you talk about the hit piece, there was a lot of real personal stuff. Do I have a checkered past? No, I have a challenged past. I've been.
No, you know what, Mary? I'm going to say this right here. We've never talked about this, and you and I have been working together for 2 years. I'm going to say this right now because I think it's important, especially if more of these hit pieces are coming. Mary, the reason why Mary moved away from Dallas is because her husband was murdered in cold blood and he died in her arms. And this hit piece touches on something where it gives these quotes saying that her son wanted to go live with his biological father. She found out she was pregnant a month after he was murdered. The biological father died. So this hit piece isn't even accurate. I don't know where they get some of this stuff, but she'd have to file reports on herself to get information that it's ludicrous. So the thing is, it's like they don't tell the full story here. And the thing is, we're not stopping. They can say what they want. We're not stopping.
and I'm
Mary,
not a
you've been through way worse. Like,
right.
you
Yeah,
know,
I've been away.
please.
And I just look at everything that I've been through and all of the decisions that I've had to make. And I just say, it's like last night with my husband. I mean, he literally said to me, don't give it any credence. Don't give it any time. He said, God's just prepared you to be able to stand up to what they're going to bring at you. And excuse my French, but my husband said, tell them, Satan, get behind me and kiss my I mean, and that's really how I feel. What did they do with this? They just emboldened me. I mean, literally, they just lit a fire because I'm
Right.
not, I mean, they have no idea. They've not walked a day
They
of their
sent,
life in my shoes.
I mean, Mary, they sent it to Mary's son. They found him and sent it to him. And I mean, what kind of wickedness is this? And with me, I'm used to this because I ran for school board, and it was the left that was coming after me, and they created a website about me, and they targeted me through Twitter during a school board meeting. They attacked my website with porn. I had to be escorted out by the police during the school board meeting because they were tweeting me during the meeting saying, we see you, or I see you. I mean, just weird stuff. So, I mean, this isn't new, but it's new from the right. So think about, if the left is attacking me for calling me a Tea Party activist, now the right is saying I'm a liberal. Like, okay, which am I?
Right.
Well, and I, Lynn spoke at AFT, but I'm going to say I showed up at the State Board of Education. We'll just totally own this. I would go and speak, and I was talking about just truth and what the accuracy and revealing what's really going on. And people from the left started reaching out to me and saying, who are you? And why are you willing to say these things? So we're not, the battle we're fighting is not a partisan battle. Children are not born right or left. Our organization is not a partisan organization. We do happen to be almost all Republicans. But I will tell you, I have warned the Republican Party in Texas that they are giving the Democrats the license to take over this state because of the infighting and the way they treat one another and the fact that they will not have dialogue that solves problems. And in order to solve problems, you are going to have to talk to both sides. And somebody's going to have to put truth at the center of the conversation. And there is a definition of truth. It's not arbitrary. And I just, so the hit piece, I could really care less. I mean, like, I don't know how many people are going to read it. I don't know. If you want to ask me a question about it, you can ask me whatever you want to about it, because I am an open book.
Yeah.
Yeah, you really are.
It just seems that they want the battle for school choice to be binary.
Yeah.
You're for school choice or you're against it. Who are all the people that are against it? Call it the left and the whatever and the teachers, as they say. But the people on the right, there's still two choices there. There's still what you guys are saying is you've got to read the details. You've got to get educated about these things because it is not what it seems. And think back to like 1913 when they repealed or when they passed the 16th Amendment, the direct taxation of income, or even the Federal Reserve back in 19. But how did they sell the income tax? How did they sell that? Oh, don't worry, we're just going to tax the rich. It's just going to be for a short time. It's just going to be a really small amount. They put the framework in place, and here we are 100 years later, 73,000 pages of tax code. Think about the Department of Homeland Security. We're just going to go after the terrorists. We're just going to go after the bad guys. Everybody's for that. They put the framework in place. Here we are 20 years later, and it's moms at school boards meetings and it's Catholics.
Yeah. I mean, really, the number one message that you hear from Lynn and I, not the number one, but a recurring theme is less government, less government, less government. Get the government out of it. I mean, and you would think that after COVID, that there would be such a swell of people who understand that that the government has to be, that you have to resist the government. Little digress. So my grandfather was born in 1901, and I toured where he was stationed in World War I with him. And I, I have these memories as a child of him being this kind of belligerent thing. But the one thing that man said over and over and over again is that damn government, get the government out of it. And when that thing happened with David Koresh and everything, my grandfather was like, it's none of their business, and I just remember him. And I remember I was young and I thought, why is he on this rant about the government all the time? And, it's kind of that mirror, mirror on the wall. I am my mother after all. And now I'm like, oh my gosh, my grandfather really left an indelible impression on me.
Right.
It's that damn government. But our government, the government overreach is out of control, and the party that is supposed to be for small government is the one that's driving the overreach. And I don't know what the left is driving, but I know that the right is driving this horrific expenditures and the great expansion of the government. And the Constitution was written to protect us from that, and we must utilize our constitutional rights before it takes force to have our freedom. And the window is narrowing.
Yes.
Well, and I'll say, one of the things I thought was funny that we have some tinfoil hats. That is what they said
Right.
in the hit piece. Tinfoil hats, and we're counterfeit conservatives and all these wild conspiracy theories. Well, one of the things that they tried to tie me to Israel and this whole battle that's going on with the nation of Israel, and all of the tweets that they put in there, I made before October 7th, and I was talking about the pandemic, and Israel was first to implement the Green Pass. They vaccinated, 90+% of their population. So I was talking about the World Economic Forum and Davos and the pandemic and all of that years ago, because the governor kept us locked down. And the governor was not one pushing for us to open Texas up. He created a window dressing commission that gave the illusion that he was trying to open Texas, but we remained under emergency powers up until, what was it? Not that long ago. It was a year ago, Mary, or maybe a year and a half.
Where's the attack?
Still under it.
Where's the attack piece on him for being a faux conservative?
Right. And so then they're shaming us for weaponizing. This is what the guy said at the convention. They're weaponizing that strings language against Ted Cruz and Donald Trump and who else? Trump, Cruz, and who was the third one that they said, Mary? Anyway.
Well, they said Creighton and Brad Buckley and Trump and Cruz and Abbott. We weaponize, we use the no strings attached to weaponize them.
No, they're weaponizing it against us
to
try and put it back in. That is the weapon. The strings are the weapon. They're going to use that against us, and it will impact. And so people can say, well, you don't have to do it. You can opt out of it. You don't have to take the money if you're a homeschooler. No, it changes the whole the whole landscape of homeschooling, and it puts them at risk. So those who have the right to do that now, they will be put under an umbrella that we call this Trojan horse of school choice. So it will impact all aspects of schooling. Doesn't matter. Homeschool, private school, charter school, everyone will be folded into the system. And then another lane that they're trying to create is the virtual education lane, which we fought last session too. So if they get their way, we'll be paying for 4 lanes of education. We've got the charter schools and public schools. Now we'll have virtual schools and vouchers. Those all create new lanes. It's not siphoning money away from public schools to private schools. It's actually adding a new tax. It's new taxation. People don't understand that.
So people on the right agree with school choice, but the more people read the details, the more people understand the strings attached, the government control, the government definitions, the new lanes, the new taxes, the new administrative state. Once people realize that that is involved in the school choice as it's being presented today, the popularity for and support for school choice goes down. Is that correct?
That's correct. And we have people who actually are joining us. Once they understand, then they are like, oh, we have to stop this.
Well,
very bad.
one of the things that has been advantageous for us is that we do read the bills, and the bills that they've put out there have been horrific. I mean, the bill that they championed and that they actually persecuted the 21 Republicans who voted to pull part of it out, and then the bill was never voted on. It was House Bill 1. And in House Bill 1, it incentivized pregnant teenagers because schools were given additional funds for pregnant teenagers. And whatever you pay a school for is what they tolerate, and you teach what you tolerate. And so they did that. Then they also, the money, the voucher would go to the illegal immigrants first. They would be a priority in getting the voucher. So that, I mean, it's like the stuff that was in there was so egregious that once we showed people what was actually in the bill, that they were, creating havoc over having not passed the fourth special session. People were like, wow, that's in there. I mean, like, they just didn't know. And again, it goes to education. You have to educate people. It goes to the fact that we have failed media in our country, and media is owned by all of the media, all of the newspapers, every bit of print media, whether it's a magazine or a newspaper, they're all owned by 6 different organizations. And so 6 different gabillionaires own the information. They control the information that's getting put out there. That's super dangerous. So it's why something like this is so important, and you see more and more of it. But I want to go back to the hit piece because
it's so fun.
It is so fun. So one of the things, aside from the fact that I'm Lynn's flunky, and I like to let Lynn do all the talking because she's much more cautious and controlled with what she says, and I'm kind of like, I've hit my 60s, and I'm kind of like, I don't really care what you think about what I say. I'm just going to say it. So it's much safer for Lynn to talk. And
I got about 10 years to
yeah, you do. We're going to use every bit of it. We're going to use every bit of it. And so, but one of the things that they said was that Mary Lowe, and Mary says that kids are being harmed by EMF. Well, hello, we're all being harmed by EMF. Like,
that's electromagnetic frequency, for those who don't know.
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
Just bring that. And
I have said that. I've printed it. I've handed it out. I've given everyone the research that says in a closed classroom with 20 Chromebooks open and plugged in, what the magnitude of EMF radiation is and how damaging it is to the thin skull of a kindergartner, because that skull is still thin. That is still thin. And this is not hyperbole on my part. This is scientific data. This is medical data. You can go into that classroom and measure the radiation in that classroom. And when we make fodder out of things like that and diminish things like that, we are literally saying that they who are ridiculing us are literally saying that they're not interested in whether or not our kids are safe.
Right.
I mean, it's just obscene.
I mean, really, this calls attention to a lot of what we're doing. And I think it's great.
I'm the flunky, but I got to tell you, I think when people aren't looking at some of these things, I'm not even interested. If you can't keep up with where I'm tracking, I'll slow down, and so will Lynn. We'll both slow down and spoon feed you the facts of what's happening.
Yeah, but didn't we learn this with COVID? Didn't a lot of quote unquote the right learn this with COVID, that we can't just assume that these experts have our best interest in mind? So therefore, we've got to pull these areas of our lives back and say, look, I've been outsourcing these things for way too long. I've got to take responsibility for these things. And reading the bills. Thank God you guys are doing that. I was talking to our dear friend the other day, and she was saying that you guys crowdsourced it. You take this section, you take this section, you guys read it faster than the legislators read it.
That's right.
And I think that's absolutely wonderful. I mean, to be a part of what you guys are doing, I think is key. And more people need to get under the hood, find the devil in the details, expose it, and don't just assume. Because like you said in the beginning, a lot of people just assume. They drop their kids off at school, they pick them up later, and they just assume that whatever happens in that building, they must have my child's best interest in mind. And didn't we learn that with COVID, that that's just not the case anymore?
Yeah, and
I
they
don't
even
know,
put medical
amnesia.
apartheid in this truth about this this fake website. But I mean, medical apartheid was a huge issue, and they were segregating us in the school districts. Like my district would put masked and unmasked in separate sides of the auditorium. So they're mocking me for talking about medical apartheid happening in Israel and non-vaccinated being persecuted. And I said, my response to that tweet was, no coincidence, Israel pledges to be the world leader in transhumanism, which is all true. I mean, that they are doing it through gene therapy and gene editing and CRISPR technologies. Like, I come with receipts. I don't just say all this stuff,
Right.
throw out these wild conspiracy. No, I mean, you want to call me a conspiracy theorist? I'm an analyst. I analyze the things that they're actually doing. I read their words and I put their stuff out there, including their bills and their bad behavior and their bad votes. And they don't like to be mocked. Politicians are very thin-skinned and they're very narcissistic, and they don't like to be publicly shamed. And I've found if you don't name names, then nothing happens. So you have to show what they're doing. You have to show their bad votes, and you have to you shine the light on it so that people can rise up. And government's run by those who show up. In the cities and the municipalities, it's liberals. At the legislature, it's both. But who's in power? The Republicans. Who's had the majority for the last 20 years? It's Republicans. We have the power, and there's no excuse. And education is failing under our watch because of our bad bills. You don't get a bill passed if it's not signed by the governor. So this is on us.
Yep.
I mean, you can't even get a bill to get voted on if our lieutenant governor in Texas doesn't want it to happen. So,
Right.
I mean, we're not, I mean, the constitutional republic and the representative form of government is in great peril in Texas. And Eric Metaxas has, even though I'm not, I mean, I like some of his work, I disagree with some of his work, but he did send up a red flag, wave the flag about, can we keep the republic? Almost 10 years ago when he wrote It's a Republic, it's great if you can keep it. Probably about 10 years ago that he wrote that book. Somebody else can look up the details on that because I'm just throwing it out there. But he wrote that and warned us, and it is in peril in Texas, and even more so after this last election cycle. But one of the things that Lynn and I have experienced is they got tired of us showing up and knowing what the bills said. And so they started holding the bills and would not publish those bills that until sometimes the night before. There was one time we drove to Austin, and one of our friends was in the car in the back seat, and I think I was working on something. Lynn was driving, and somebody was sitting in the back seat. But the bill literally was not made available to us until almost 9 o'clock the night before.
Right.
To be there, we had to be in Austin at 8 o'clock, which is a 3-hour drive. So we're reading the bill in the car because that's the only opportunity we had. And let me tell you something. The gal who sat in the back seat, Holly Clemens, she nailed it. I mean, she testified.
Line by line. She just
Line by
hammered
line.
them. They hated it. In fact, the governor knows who Holly Clemens is. The governor knows that they know our names.
Yeah.
They like to play like we're outliers and we're fringy and we're radical or we're leftists or whatever. But the truth is they know who we are, and it's very dangerous because we're not paid lobbyists. We're not trying to get elected to anything. Don't care. You can do this. I don't care. I don't need to be.
They have to waive the rules. They have to waive the rules of the operating procedure of the government because they don't put those bills out until the last minute. And, who knows? I mean, it's assumption on my part, but it's also pretty humorous that, they're sick of us showing up knowing their bills line by line. And so they just hold on to them a little bit longer.
Yep.
And, and I've called a couple of offices and said, hey, I can't find that bill. And they're like, we're working on it. We're going to get it out there.
The fiscal note, what they don't release is the fiscal note. And that tells the real story. So we really ripped on them when they do not put that out there, and we're scrambling when we show up. We don't know what we're testifying on if we don't have the fiscal note, because that really tells the story.
No, well, and
Wow.
that was interesting. It's Holly. She calculated it. I mean, she just took a stab in the dark and calculated it. And so she's testifying. And while she's testifying, the fiscal note comes out, and she's testifying on what she can estimate the fiscal note to be. And literally, she was within 10%. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, so we just need more people. We still have several generations of people who have been taught to be analytical and have been taught to do research without just going to Google and pulling off of Google whatever pops
Right.
up. And so we still have a couple of those generations, and we need those people to use those skills.
Yes.
Yeah,
And we
instead
need
of
to-
reading the nasty parts of the books, they just might, you know, mute your mic and they mock you. No, let's go after the money. Follow the money, and you can get rid of a lot of these contracts. And you know, Mary and I, we constantly get criticized about not having solutions, but so much money is spent in education and so much is spent on technology, which we've hammered a couple of times. Take the money spent on the wasteful devices, which are harming kids and producing no fruit. Take the money and use it to not only train the teachers, but also pay them. I have no issue paying teachers very well. I sounded the alarms in 2017 that my district was one of the highest with their attrition rate on teachers because they were going to other districts that treated them better. Start paying them and treating them like professionals. Train them. Don't just throw them to the dogs when they come out of the teaching colleges. The teaching colleges aren't doing their jobs like they once did. And all that institutional memory of these seasoned teachers, because people think teachers are all liberals. They're not. The conservatives are everywhere, but they have to be quiet. But you know what they're doing? They're doing their jobs, and they're teaching the kids the way that they should be taught, with time-tested ways of teaching reading and math and the basics.
Yep.
And they're not out there on Twitter with purple hair talking about wanting to indoctrinate kids. No, the majority of teachers do their jobs. My kids have some raging liberal teachers in the public schools, and I follow them on social media. I know exactly where they are. But were they indoctrinating my kids? No, I watched them like a hawk. I knew because they were in public schools that I had to watch everything like a hawk. But they weren't. They were teaching. One of them was, she's teaching them on the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Like, she did her job. She taught the teaks line by line that she was supposed to do it, and she did it in her certain way.
Yep.
Okay. Well, it's risky. I would never put my kids in the public schools today. I kids. So, you know, let me just make that clear. But I'm very concerned with what kids are learning, how they're learning, and Alice taught us this, you know, and understanding the professional development, which they're being evaluated on. Like, who's profiting off of all of that?
Right.
You know?
We're losing you, Mary.
Yeah, Mary, you're there. We got
I do want to continue this conversation. You guys got to get ready for your testifying this week in your research. I want to follow up with you guys on a continuous basis and see how this goes. See if you guys can figure out who is really behind that hit piece and all that. But
we'll get to the bottom of it. For
absolutely,
sure.
good.
I'm trained by Project Veritas. I didn't get the job, but we're sleuthy. We'll figure this out.
Awesome. Excellent. God bless you guys. I just want to thank you so much for your service to our country in defending the next generation and the education sphere. God bless you guys.
Thank you. God bless you too.
You doing all right over there, Mary? Yeah. Any final thoughts there, Mary? You want to share with us? Well, I don't think she can hear us.
No.
Lynn, any final thoughts there?
Families Engaged, find the solutions. We've got a lot of research and information out there, and be watching the state board meetings in Texas, because we will be testifying there multiple days, Wednesday and Thursday.
Yeah.
And yes, happy to come back and talk about the follow-up on that.
That's awesome. Very good. I hope to see you guys at the workshop too.
Yes.
But stay right here. Stay right here. I'm going to end this, and then we'll chat. God bless you guys. This segment brought to you by the Remembrance Project, theremembranceproject.org.